Hi besties, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hi, hello, my name is Emily. I love to shout about the library, plans, and other things that I'm doing. And if you are returning, welcome back. Today we are going through my February wrap-up, and I actually had such a great reading month in February. But before we get into all the books that I read last month, I wanted to highlight something really fun that is happening in the book community at the end of March. The TransRightsReadathon is happening this year from March 17th through the 31st, and this is a time for the book community to really talk about, highlight, share, post, all of the things. Books by and about trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, two-spirit, everything under that umbrella, authors and characters. This will be the third year that I am participating, and last year I hosted a fundraiser for a trans rights organization here in Pittsburgh, Sisters PGH, and I love everything that this organization is doing. This year, however, I am going to be fundraising for a different organization for a fundraiser that has not yet been announced and something that I've been working on in the background, so I am very, very, very excited about that. I will also be sharing a plethora of book recs, other organizations for you to follow, as well as my own TBR during this Trans Rights Readathon, so please make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on all of your notifications on all of my platforms. I'll mostly be talking about it on my Instagram channel, but I will also be posting more long-form content here on YouTube, and I'll probably start, experimenting with how text posts do on my YouTube channel as well. And one way to support all of these authors is to obviously purchase their books, pre-order their books, sign up for their newsletters, follow them on social media. And if you are opting in to purchase any of the books that I will be talking about during the Trans Rights Readathon, I have links for Libro.fm and also bookshop.org. Both of those are places where you can buy books online, ebooks, audiobooks, physical books, all of the things, while also supporting your local indie bookstore. So I love both of them, bookshop.org and Libro.fm, so much. If I am not reading books from my library, I am getting them from there. And if I love a book so much that I have read from my library, I am getting them from there, because I have books on my bookshelf, and I have some over here. I have like 400 books, so that's where I buy them. Okay, anyways, let's get into my February recap. So I read 11 books in the month of February, and the first 5 that I read were actually part of my 10 books in 10 days challenge, which I did a little YouTube vlog for that. That was actually a ton of fun, but I think that this month was a little bit slower of a reading month for me because of that, because I was just reading so many books in such a short amount of time that afterwards my brain was like, hey girl, we're done reading for a little bit, okay? Now, I do read a lot of books that have a lot of trigger warnings. I do read a lot of dark shit, so just make sure you check your trigger warnings if you are choosing to pick up any of these books. The first book that I read in February was Guillotine by Delilah S. Dawson, and this book was such a fun, campy, ether-rich horror type of novella. It follows our main character, Des, who uses her boyfriend to get closer to his mom because she is like some big shot in the fashion industry that Des is trying to crack into. So Patrick, the boyfriend, invites her to their island to celebrate like Easter with his family, and little does she know that is actually the weekend that all of the staff, like the help on that island, have chosen to murder that entire rich family. So she finds herself in this like fight for survival against the people that she like resonates with and connects with more than the actual rich people, because she herself is not rich. It's a very, very, very good book. It is such a quick read, and honestly, I had just such a good time with it. The next book I read was The Butcher of the Forest by Premee, and this is another like very dark novella. It follows our main character, Varys, who is one of the only people, actually I think she is the only person ever to go into this very deadly forest and make it out alive. The forest is so forbidden, and nobody is ever like supposed to go in this forest because it is so deadly that she swears she's never going to go back into it. But of course she gets roped into going back in and saving the children of this merciless tyrant of her land who's going to murder her entire family if she doesn't go and save his children, who shouldn't have gone in the first place. And so we spend a majority of the time actually in the forest, and that's like the horror aspect of it. There's a lot of traps awaiting her because of the first time that she went in. There's a lot of ancient monsters. There's a lot of things that she has to deal with from her past. And all of this sounds like it would be so fun, but I actually just didn't super love this book too much. It was really hard for me to like care about anything that was going on because I felt like the writing was a little bit surface level, where I didn't like feel myself getting thrown into the story of how I would want to in this type of story. Overall, I felt like it was very slow paced, and it might be better as an audiobook. I read it in physical format. I don't know if the audiobook is any better, but I think it might be, so you could put it on like 3x speed, I did enjoy the ending though, but I don't think that enjoying the ending while reading 150 pages prior to that really makes up for the story. You might like it if you like maybe slower horror books, but for me, it was pretty mid. Next, I read the Sworn Soldier series by T. Kingfisher, and this is actually comprised of 3 novellas. The books What Moves the Dead, What Feasts at Night, and What Stalks the Deep, and all of these are like a gothic horror, dark fantasy type of novellas, and it all follows one main character, Alex, who is this retired soldier, and they are roped into all of these like mysterious things. What I loved most about these books was the very vivid and gruesome writing, while it also mixed comedy in with it. And Alex, the main character, ended up breaking the fourth wall multiple times to talk to us, the audience. And I typically don't like that in books, but the way that it was done in these books was phenomenal. I actually was like excited whenever it was happening. Like I found myself like, you know, like giggling and just like having a good time with the book overall, even though it was like very horror-esque. I also really liked how it touched on the dark folklore that these books were based on, where I actually wanted to like go and see and go and read and educate myself more and read more about the things, the folklore that it was based on, because it was just written very well, and you know, I like retellings. So, and actually this would be a great series if you want to add it to your Trans Rights Readathon TBR, because all 3 of the books follow our main character Alex, who is non-binary, and with them being a retired soldier and also having friends that are retired soldiers, it has some great PTSD rep and also some disability rep. I read all of these books with my ears. I listened to the audiobook. Fantastic. Highly recommend reading them through narration, because the narrator just did a fantastic job with this series. The next book I finished was actually a DNF, and it was Master of Poisons by Andrea Hairston. I bought this book a couple years ago because the cover drew me in. I looked at this on like the Barnes & Noble shelves. Every time I went, I was like, I'm gonna get them, because it always had the 50% off sticker on it, right? Like the buy one, get one 50% off. I was like, I'm going to get those. It fell really short for me, which was really disappointing, because it felt like this book was gonna be right up my alley. So this is described as an epic climate science fiction book wherein the world is just dying, the planet is dying, and all of the humans refuse to act on it, even though there are poisonous tornadoes and, you know, failing crops, and the land is drying up, and it feels, you know, very similar, very timely for right now. The one thing I was also really excited about reading in this book was all of the queer rep, and I just love a really good book with griots. Griots. I think it's pronounced griots. I think the T is silent, right? Anyways, the writing style just really like hindered my enjoyment of this book. I felt like it was very like whimsical and lyrical, but this type of book, like an epic climate science fiction book, is not the place to have such whimsical and lyrical writing, in my opinion. There was just like a whole lot of words with like nothing to say, and I ended up making about like, I think about a quarter or a third of the way through, and I was like almost to the end of part 1. And I was like, I'm really struggling. I need to look at other people's reviews to see if they have said the same thing, because if not and they say it gets better, I was like, maybe I can switch to the audiobook. No, like almost all of the reviews had similar things to say as what I was feeling, so I decided to just DNF it. I didn't want to put myself back into a reading slump. I might get back to it, you know, in the future, because it does feel like a book that I would very much enjoy. I've also seen some reviews that say it's very similar to M.K. Jemison's work, where it's not for everyone, but the people who like it love it so much, so you may like it. It's just not for me. And now I'm going into the next book that I'm reading, and I just want to say, I know I said in this video multiple times that I had a great reading month. This is another book. The next book I read was another book that was actually terrible, and I can't recommend for anyone to read, but I promise after this it'll be way better. After this it goes uphill. So the next book I read was The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, and I read this for my in-person book club. Somebody else had like chosen it because we wanted to read a book that had a season in the title, so we chose winter, The Winter People. There we go. So we read this for my in-person book club, Bessie's book club. I binge read this book the Sunday before we meet. Like, I sped through it, and I didn't really critically think about any of like really what I was reading until we got into the book club meeting, and we were ripping this book apart. Like I've never been in a book club where we all fucking hated a book so much. And after the book club, I was thinking about this book like so much. I just couldn't get out of my head, because like, how did this book get published? I'm not even gonna go into what this book is about, because I think it would be a disservice to be talking about like the actual problematic things that are happening in this book for fear that you would think that it sounds good and you're like, well, I'm just gonna read it anyway. No, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to tell you the main issue that I had with this book was the representation, and specifically the Indigenous representation. So this is a horror and paranormal book, so like white people will be white people, but of course there is one Indigenous person who is considered like called Auntie for one of the main characters, and they know a lot about this land. Like their family is Indigenous to the area, and they have just grown up with being respectful towards the land. So they know a lot about the land, and this is important, so hang on. Because she had a lot of holistic approaches to things, she was often considered like a witch, and people would warn their children away from her, and you know, she was just generally seen through a bad lens, which that is like strike number one. Of course, the only Indigenous person in your book, you're going to write in that way. But it got even worse because of the amount of animalistic qualities that they used to describe this Auntie character. Like one example, her teeth specifically are referred to as pointed and stained brown teeth. Which that like really rubbed me the wrong way. But the part that makes it even worse is she was actually presumed dead earlier in the book, but somehow she is still the villain in the story. She is still the reason for all these bad things happening. And towards the end of the book, whenever we realize that she is not actually dead, her death in the book is a very like animalistic death, wherein this creepy fucking child skins her alive like they would an animal. So yeah, I will never be reading anything by this author again. Disappointed that this was something that I had like posted about publicly on my channel, on my Instagram account specifically, because I was like, Betsy's Book Club, this is our book, and I hadn't heard of this book before. I hadn't, you know, done any research on this book. This was just one that we had chosen, and learned my lesson. And after all of that, I just needed a really fun and lighthearted book to pick up, so I picked up One Last Job by Anise Starre, and this book was fantastic. It was like everything that I would want in a romance book, except for one little itty bitty part. So this book follows our two main characters, Amber, who is a designer and project manager, and Finn, who is a managing director at his uncle's firm. Well, his uncle's firm is based in the United States. He is from America, and they want to expand overseas into London, so they hire Amber's company to do this design work for the August project, which is, you know, the job site that they'll both be working on. This book has workplace enemies to lovers, a rich man who like buys her anything. It's really cute, it's kind of spicy, and honestly I don't super love enemies to lovers when it comes to romance most times, but I thought that this was done really well, and I think it's because Amber was written to be such a strong female main lead that like she was just standing her ground. Like she was just calling him out on his bullshit, and that was like the enemies part. Like, okay. The only thing that I did not like about this book, and this is going to be a spoiler alert. This is going to be a spoiler alert. So if you don't want a spoiler for this book, fast forward just a little bit, you know, to the next chapter that I've outlined in this video. This will be a spoiler. Okay, don't say that I didn't warn you. So the part that I actually hated about this book, this is going to be a spoiler. Okay. Finn bought a house in America where he is from, expecting Amber to eventually move to the United States and live there with him. After she had just quit her bullshit job with a fuck-ass boss who she did not like, she quit the job, bought her own house in London to get away from her parents who were like not supportive of her at all. She's making a life for herself in London, who by the way is a black woman, and you want her to pick up her life and come to America to live with you in America as a black woman, and you didn't even ask if she wanted to do that. Finn, please, don't piss me off. The audacity, like the rest of the romance is just so good. The rest of the book is just so good. It's just that last little part, like if you just don't read the last two chapters, perfect, loved it. The rest of the books in this series I really, really liked, so take that as you will. The next book that I read was All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir, and this book, it will destroy you. Like, in the best way possible, you will be destroyed. So don't pick it up unless you're ready for that. It is a contemporary YA fiction book that follows two Pakistani Americans who have to navigate, like, their late teenage years right before they go to college. They have to navigate their lives themselves because they just have, honestly, really bad family members. I absolutely loved how this book switched between the two main characters' POVs, but also kind of like within the families, like their timelines, like jumping between timelines and kind of explaining a little bit of backstory of the parental figures so that way we had more context. And this book does heavily touch on PTSD. So take care whenever you read it, but I thought the way that the PTSD was handled, wherein like the body remembers but the mind doesn't, just hit so close to home for me. And it was just like phenomenal. The way that it was done, the way that it was written, top tier. Sabaa Tahir is an autobiography author for me. Every one of her books have like emotionally destroyed me, and this book specifically was just so heartbreaking for me that she will continue to be an autobiography author, but I know that I need to I have to be in the right mental state to be reading her books, but God, please check your trigger warnings if you are going to read this book, but this was one that will stick with me for a very long time. The next book I read was Friday Black by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, and this book was so fucking good. It is a series of short stories that range from like historical dystopian fiction to political like sci-fi. All of these stories touch on violence and injustice and the painful absurdities that Black people face in America today. And the story that really stuck with me was Zimmerland, which is one of the short stories. And this is just so similar to one of her other books, which is one of my favorite books of all time, Chain Gang All-Stars. It showcases racism as a sport and has a company literally profiting off of the death and harm caused to Black people. The main character in the short story is a Black man, and he is working for this corporation where he basically inserts himself into made-up scenarios that white people can pay to be a part of, so that way they can live out their like racial profiling and their like racism and being able to like ethically and are allowed to murder a Black man. And the whole point of the story is that this corporation is, you know, offering this to white people as an alternative to not actually going out on the street and like murdering Black people. And it feels so wrong to be saying this, but this short story was genuinely like so good and one of my favorite books, or in one of my favorite short stories from this book. Definitely pick this up, especially if you're looking for a short story collection, because speechless. It was just very good. The last book I read was Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, and I actually listed this book as one of my top 5 favorite sci-fi books. This was a reread for me, just as good the second time around, and I actually reread it this year because I want to read the graphic novel adaptations of these 2 books eventually sometime this year. These books I just know are going to be great and will fit so well with graphic pictures, with illustrations. That's what I'm trying to say. With illustrations on graphic novels. So this book is majorly set in 2026, and it is just so eerily close and similar to our own. And I wanted to read this book now because I feel like I have been very burnt out with consuming just like horrific story next to horrific images, next to like genocide, next to rights being taken, next to ICE abducting our neighbors, next to people being lynched. Like it's like bombarding when you scroll on social media. Like doom scrolling has been something that I have needed to like take a break from, while still finding the balance of being informed and being an activist to shed light about these things and provide action items for what we can do. So anyways, I was just feeling very helpless recently, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to reread this book, because while this book does touch on, you know, like racism and classism, it also touches on the environmental factors and everything else that I have just mentioned previously. I feel like I have like an activist, like I feel like there are things and steps that activism or that activists can take to kind of like make a difference, but environmentally it is so up to governments and corporations and stuff. Like there is literally nothing that I can do other than be like, call your senators. Please call your senators. Meanwhile, we're literally dropping bombs on other countries. Like, so the environmental thing is something that I am personally struggling with, and obviously I'm still having a hard time like articulating what the actual issue is, but the reason I wanted to read this book and the reason I like climate science fiction so much right now is because it shows you like how depressing like our worst case scenario is in these books, and these people are still surviving. Like they are finding a way to still survive and make do and find new ways of living and new ways of being sustainable, like not sustainable, but like, yeah, just being able to live in these worst case scenarios that we are being threatened with now. So it helps to give me hope for the future. And I don't know, this book honestly did do that. And I don't know, that's honestly like a think piece for another day and probably could be a video all in and of itself. But yeah, if you're feeling similar, I would highly recommend Parable of the Sower. just because it also is like taking place literally 2026, literally right now, this year, 2026. Anyways, these are the 11 books that I read for February. I know I said it was actually a really good month. The books that I read were just the good ones, so high. The bad ones, so low, you know, but I'm choosing to focus on the high ones because it was a really good reading month for me. 8 of these books I got from my library, which is amazing. The other 3 I read just off of my bookshelf. If you have read any of these, let me know. If you are of a similar mind, if you had different feelings, opinions, if you haven't read any of these, but maybe I've convinced you now that you should read one of these. I don't know. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow along for more videos. I have a new video coming out every weekend morning, and you have a 50-50 shot of it being a library focused video. Okay, that's all. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!